Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I'm Stefan, 34, and I built a multi-million-dollar resort business that my family knows nothing about. When my sister Brianna texted, "You can't afford our wedding venue, stay home," I felt that familiar sting of family rejection. My mother's response, "Thank God," with a relief emoji, twisted the knife deeper. They had no idea I owned the very resort they were mocking me about. My quiet revenge was just beginning to unfold. Family relationships can be so complicated, right? Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if family drama resonates with you. Growing up in a middle-class family in Massachusetts, there was always an unspoken hierarchy in our household. My parents, Martha and Harold Patterson, never tried to hide the fact that my sister Brianna was their favorite. While most parents, at least, pretend to love their children equally, mine made no such effort. From my earliest memories, Brianna received praise for everything she did. When she brought home B grades, there were celebrations. When I brought home straight A's, I got a distracted, "good job," while my parents continued watching TV. This pattern continued throughout our childhood and teenage years. I discovered my passion for business early. At 12, I started mowing lawns in our neighborhood. By 14, I had 5 other kids working for me, and we handled yard maintenance for half the subdivision. My parents dismissed it as playing businessman and suggested I focus more on real studies instead. "Business is for people who can't do anything else," my father would say with a dismissive wave. "You need a real profession, like your sister's pre-med track." The irony was that Brianna changed her major 3 times and ultimately graduated with an art history degree that she never used. Meanwhile, I was learning real-world skills and saving every penny. High school was more of the same. While Brianna was crowned prom queen and captain of the debate team, I was building my first real business, a website design company that actually turned a decent profit for a 17-year-old. My parents still considered it a hobby and pushed me to apply to prestigious universities. I did get accepted to several good schools, but after my freshman year, I realized I was learning more from my side businesses than from my business administration classes. When I told my parents I wanted to drop out and focus on entrepreneurship, you'd have thought I announced plans to join a cult. "No son of mine is going to be a college dropout," my father roared. "You finish your degree or don't bother coming home." That ultimatum made my decision easier. I left college, couch-surfed with friends, and worked 18-hour days building my first serious venture, a property management company for vacation rentals. The early years were tough. I lived on ramen noodles and worked out of coffee shops to save on rent. Every few months, I'd call home, hoping for some support or at least interest in my life. Instead, I'd hear about Brianna's latest achievement or relationship. If I mentioned any progress with my business, my mother would quickly change the subject, or my father would scoff. "When are you going to get a real job?" became their standard question. "Your sister just got promoted at the gallery. Why can't you be more like her?" What they didn't know, because they never bothered to ask, was that my business was growing. By 25, I had expanded from property management into actual property acquisition. I purchased my first small beachfront property in the Hamptons when a client was facing foreclosure and offered me a deal. That first property became the seed of what would grow into Hampton Horizon Resorts. I renovated it, marketed it effectively, and reinvested every dollar of profit. 3 years later, I bought the adjacent property. 2 years after that, I acquired the entire block. By the time I turned 30, I owned one of the most exclusive resort properties in the Hamptons, catering to celebrities and business executives seeking privacy and luxury. The business was valued at over $30 million. But you'd never know it from my modest lifestyle or the way I dressed when visiting my family. I made a conscious decision not to tell them about my success. Years of dismissal and mockery had taught me that their approval shouldn't be my goal. Plus, there was something telling about letting them continue to treat me as the family failure while I built something significant. It revealed their true characters, unfiltered by the knowledge of my wealth. Brianna evolved from the favored child into an entitled adult. She worked at an art gallery briefly before quitting, to find herself, which mainly involved spending our parents' money and posting carefully curated photos on social media. She developed expensive tastes and a habit of judging people solely by their apparent wealth and status. "Did you see Stefan's shoes?" she once whispered loudly to our mother at Thanksgiving dinner. "I don't think he's bought new ones since high school." She had no idea those shabby shoes were handcrafted Italian leather that I'd worn in the garden earlier to help our father with yard work. The shoes cost more than her entire outfit, but I never corrected her assumptions. My relationship with my parents remained strained. They continued to view me through the lens they'd created in my childhood, the underachieving son who couldn't measure up to his brilliant sister. They never asked about my business in any meaningful way, and I never volunteered information. By the time the events of this story began, we had settled into a pattern of obligatory holiday visits and occasional phone calls filled with subtle digs about my perceived lack of success. Little did they know that the family failure had built an empire, one that was about to become central to my sister's wedding plan. The news of Brianna's engagement came through a family group text, complete with a close-up of her massive diamond ring. She said yes, read the message from her boyfriend, now fiancé Trevor Blackwood. Trevor was exactly the kind of man Brianna had always wanted to marry. Handsome, from a well-connected family, and working in finance with a salary that supported her lifestyle expectations. They had been dating for just over a year, having met at a charity gala that Brianna attended with our parents. I texted my congratulations immediately, genuinely happy that my sister had found someone who seemed to make her happy. Despite our strained relationship, I never wished her ill. My phone rang almost instantly after I sent the message. "Stefan, can you believe it?" Brianna's voice was pitched high with excitement. "Trevor proposed at Le Cirque with a string quartet. The ring is 4 carats. "That's wonderful, Bri," I said, using her childhood nickname. "I'm really happy for you. We're having an engagement dinner next Saturday at Mom and Dad's. You'll be there, right?" she asked, though it sounded more like a command than a question. "I wouldn't miss it, I promised." The engagement dinner was predictably lavish, with our parents transforming their backyard into a Pinterest-worthy celebration space. Trevor's family attended his parents, William and Joanne Blackwood, old money from Connecticut, and his brother Dennis, who worked alongside Trevor at the same investment firm. During dinner, I found myself seated next to Dennis, while Brianna held court at the center of the table, describing her proposal story for the 5th time. "So, you're the brother," Dennis said, studying me over his wine glass. "Brianna mentioned you're between jobs?" I smiled. "Not exactly. I own a small business." "Oh?" His interest seemed to wane immediately. "What kind?" "Property management mostly," I said, which was technically true, if vastly underselling the reality. Dennis nodded, then turned his attention to a more interesting conversation elsewhere. Later, as dessert was being served, Brianna clinked her glass for attention. "Trevor and I have set a date," she announced. "We'll be getting married next May, which gives us 8 months to plan the perfect wedding." Our mother squealed with delight and immediately began discussing potential venues with Brianna and Joanne Blackwood. I listened as they tossed around names of country clubs and historic mansions, each seemingly more exclusive than the last. "We want something truly special," Brianna declared. "Somewhere our friends will talk about for years." "Have you considered the Hamptons?" Trevor's mother suggested. "There's a stunning new resort there, Hampton Horizon. It's practically impossible to book, but William might have connections." I nearly choked on my tiramisu. They were talking about my resort. "I've heard of it," our father said thoughtfully. "Very exclusive. Very expensive." "Money is no object for my daughter's special day," Trevor's father boomed. "I'll make some calls tomorrow." I sat quietly, contemplating the bizarre situation unfolding. Should I tell them? The thought passed through my mind briefly, but years of conditioning kept me silent. What would be the point? They'd either not believe me, or worse, suddenly change their treatment of me because of my success rather than who I was as a person. Over the next few weeks, the wedding planning consumed all family conversations. Brianna created an exhaustive spreadsheet of potential venues, but kept returning to Hampton Horizon as her first choice. "It's absolutely perfect," she gushed during a family dinner 3 weeks after her engagement. "They have this incredible ocean view ceremony space, and the ballroom can hold 300 people. Have you toured it yet?" I asked casually. "We're going next weekend," she said. "Trevor's father knows someone who knows the manager, so they're giving us a special tour." I nodded, making a mental note to alert my staff without revealing my connection. "Sounds nice." "Nice?" Brianna scoffed. "It's the most exclusive resort in the Northeast. You wouldn't understand, Stefan. Some things are worth investing in." Our mother patted Brianna's hand. "Your brother has different priorities, dear." The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife, but I'd grown accustomed to it over the years. The following Monday, I received an excited call from my resort manager, Jackson. "Boss, you won't believe who toured the property this weekend for a wedding booking," he said. "Let me guess, my sister and her fiancé." Exactly. I nearly fell over when I saw the name Brianna Patterson on the appointment list. "I kept your connection quiet, just as you instructed whenever family visits." "How did it go?" I asked. They loved the place. The fiancé's father was throwing around his connections, trying to impress us, not realizing he was speaking to your direct report. "They've tentatively booked next May 15th, pending contract and deposit. Process it normally," I instructed. "Don't give them any special treatment, good or bad. Just handle it like any other booking." As the weeks passed, Brianna's wedding plans dominated every family interaction. She secured her date at Hampton Horizon, putting down a substantial deposit that Trevor's parents provided. She selected an exclusive caterer, a renowned florist, and a photographer who typically worked with celebrities. I received regular updates from my staff about her increasingly demanding requests and multiple site visits. Apparently, she'd already made 4 unscheduled appearances at the resort to just check on a few things, driving my events team slightly crazy. Throughout this process, I maintained my distance, attending required family functions but avoiding direct involvement in the wedding planning. Brianna rarely asked for my input anyway, except to occasionally mention how much everything cost, seemingly to emphasize the gap between her lifestyle and what she perceived as mine. "The flower budget alone is more than you probably make in a year," she remarked during one Sunday lunch, her tone casual but the dig intentional. Our parents never corrected these jabs. If anything, they seemed to find them amusing, exchanging knowing glances whenever Brianna highlighted the contrast between her lavish wedding and my supposed financial limitations. Despite this treatment, I initially planned to attend the wedding. She was still my sister, and part of me hoped that perhaps marriage and maturity might eventually soften her entitled outlook. I even considered giving them a generous gift, not revealing my ownership of the resort, but perhaps covering a significant portion of the costs anonymously. But then came the text messages that would change everything. 6 months into Brianna's wedding planning, I was in a meeting with investors when my phone buzzed repeatedly. Glancing down, I saw a flurry of messages in the family group chat. Brianna was sending updates about wedding accommodations. "Everyone in the wedding party will stay at Hampton Horizon," she wrote. "Mom and Dad, you'll have the Oceanside suite. Trevor's parents are in the presidential suite." There were more messages assigning rooms to various relatives and friends. I noticed I wasn't mentioned, but assumed she'd text me separately. The meeting concluded, and as I was walking to my car, a private message from Brianna appeared. "Stefan, regarding the wedding accommodations," it began. I opened it, expecting details about where I'd be staying. Instead, I read, "You can't afford our wedding venue. Stay home." I stopped walking, staring at my phone in disbelief. Before I could respond, another message appeared in the thread, this one from our mother. "Thank God," followed by a relief emoji. The conversation continued between them. "Brianna, I didn't know how to tell him the rooms start at $1,200 per night." "Mom, it's better this way. He'd feel out of place anyway with Trevor's friends and family." Brianna, "Plus his wardrobe. Can you imagine? Remember Christmas dinner?" "Mom, we can tell people he had a work commitment. No one needs to know." They continued this exchange as if I wasn't included in the very thread they were writing in. The casual cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. After all these years, after all the subtle and not-so-subtle put-downs, they were now explicitly excluding me from my sister's wedding because they assumed I couldn't afford to attend. The irony was almost too much to process. They were talking about my resort, my success, the empire I'd built, while they were dismissing me as a failure. Rooms that cost $1,200 per night in a property where I owned the penthouse suite, a fact they'd never bothered to discover. I considered multiple responses. I could finally reveal everything. I could express my hurt at their assumptions. I could point out that as the brother of the bride, I should be included regardless of my financial situation. Instead, I typed 6 words. Okay, selling the resort. It was cryptic and could be interpreted multiple ways, which was precisely my intention. I hit send and put my phone away, needing time to process my feelings before engaging further. When I checked my messages an hour later, the family chat had exploded. Brianna, very funny, Stefan, always with the jokes. Mom, your brother thinks he's so clever. Dad, Stefan, don't be dramatic. If you need help with accommodations, we can discuss it. Brianna, he's not selling anything because he doesn't own anything. Classic Stefan trying to make everything about him. Their mockery continued, each message more dismissive than the last. They had taken my cryptic statement as some pathetic attempt at humor or attention-seeking rather than considering for even a moment that there might be more to my life than they assumed. The realization was painful but clarifying. My family had created a narrative about me that was so firmly entrenched that no evidence could penetrate it. In their minds, I was eternally the underachieving brother who couldn't possibly have built anything of value. I put my phone away again and drove to my actual home, a waterfront property 5 miles from the resort, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. As I stood on my deck watching the sunset, I considered my options. I could continue the charade, attend the wedding as the poor relation, and maintain the status quo. I could reveal my ownership dramatically at the wedding itself, a tempting but petty option. Or I could let events unfold naturally, allowing the truth to emerge on its own terms. The decision crystallized as I watched the waves. I would neither hide nor flaunt my success. I would simply stop participating in the fiction my family had created about me. If that led to revelations, so be it. The next morning, I called Jackson, my resort manager. That wedding booking next May for Brianna Patterson, I said. I need you to flag it for special attention. Special as in VIP treatment? Jackson asked. No, I replied. Special as in prepare for changes. For the next week, I ignored the continuing group messages about wedding plans. My silence eventually prompted a call from our father. Stefan, what's going on with you? Your mother says you're not responding to wedding updates. I got the message loud and clear. Dad, I said calmly. I'm not welcome at the venue, so I'll respect Brianna's wishes. Don't be ridiculous, he huffed. Of course you're welcome. It's your sister's wedding. That's not what her text said, I pointed out. You know how Brianna gets with her planning. She's under a lot of pressure. Pressure doesn't make you tell your brother he's not welcome, I countered. Pressure doesn't make Mom respond with, thank God. There was a long pause. She didn't mean it like that. How else could she mean it, Dad? He had no answer, just an uncomfortable silence followed by a subject change. The conversation ended with nothing resolved, which was typical of our family's approach to conflict: ignore it until it goes away. But this conflict wasn't going away. In fact, it was about to escalate in ways none of them could anticipate. 2 weeks after the hurtful text exchange, I scheduled a meeting with my resort management team. We gathered in the conference room overlooking the ocean, the same room where countless celebrities and business leaders had discussed their events. I need to discuss a sensitive matter, I began, looking at the 6 key members of my executive team. As you know, my sister Brianna has booked her wedding here for May 15th. Jackson, my resort manager, nodded. The Patterson Blackwood wedding, one of our largest events next spring. What you don't know is that my family is unaware that I own this resort, I continued. For personal reasons, I've kept my success private. Recent events have made me reconsider this approach. I explained the text messages and the years of dismissive treatment. My team listened attentively, expressions shifting from confusion to understanding to indignation on my behalf. What would you like us to do? Asked Marissa, my events director. I've decided we need to schedule comprehensive renovations for the main ballroom and ceremony space, I said. The work will need to begin May 10th and continue through the 20th. The team exchanged glances. That would impact the Patterson Blackwood wedding, Jackson pointed out, though his tone suggested he fully understood my intention. Yes, it would, I confirmed. This property is 7 years old now. These renovations are overdue, and spring is our traditional maintenance period before the summer rush. Marissa leaned forward. Should we offer alternative dates or help them find another venue? Offer alternative dates, 3 months before or after the original date, I instructed. As for other venues, provide the standard list we give to all clients we can't accommodate. No special treatment, but no punitive measures either. This is business, not personal revenge. Everyone nodded in agreement. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics of the actual renovations we would now need to plan. I wasn't lying about the resort needing updates. I was just accelerating the timeline. Who should make the call to the client? Jackson asked as the meeting concluded. Follow normal protocol, I said. Have the events team contact the primary booking party. 3 days later, I was in New York for meetings when my phone began buzzing incessantly. Brianna was calling repeatedly, interspersed with texts demanding I answer. I silenced the phone and continued my lunch with a potential investor. When I checked my messages afterward, I had 17 missed calls from Brianna, 12 from our mother, and 8 from our father. The family group chat had exploded with frantic messages. Brianna: disaster! Hampton Horizon just called. They're canceling all events for renovations during our wedding week. Mom: this can't be happening. Williams Connections were supposed to prevent this kind of thing. Brianna: they said it was a management decision that can't be overruled. I'm devastated. Dad: has anyone reached Stefan? Maybe he knows someone who can help. That last message was particularly ironic. For the first time ever, my father was suggesting that my connections might be valuable, still completely unaware of the truth. I texted back to the group. Just saw this. In meetings all day. What happened? Brianna called me immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then texted, can't talk now. In a meeting. Text me details. Her response was a string of increasingly hysterical messages describing how the resort had called to cancel her booking due to renovations. They had offered alternative dates or a full refund plus compensation, but none of that mattered because she had already sent out save the date cards to 300 people. I waited until evening to call her back, by which time she had worked herself into a full meltdown. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, she sobbed into the phone. Everything was perfect. Everything! I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What did Trevor say? He's been weird about it, she sniffled, almost like he's not that upset. He suggested we look at other venues or dates, but he doesn't understand how perfect Hampton Horizon was. Maybe Trevor has the right approach, I suggested. There are other beautiful venues. Not like this one, she insisted. Stefan, you have to help me. That was new, Brianna asking for my help. What can I possibly do? I don't have any connection to this resort. I don't know, she wailed. Call them, beg them, offer to work there for free to change their minds. Something. The desperation in her voice would have been comical if it weren't so sad. She had gone from telling me I couldn't afford the venue to begging me to intervene in less than 3 weeks. I'll see what I can find out, I promised vaguely. The next day, my mother called, her voice tense with forced politeness. Stefan, darling, have you had any luck with the resort situation? I made some inquiries, I said. It sounds like the renovations are non-negotiable. Safety upgrades to the electrical system, from what I heard. But surely for the right price. She began. Some things can't be solved with money, Mom, I interrupted. Structural work has to happen. This is going to crush your sister, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She's had her heart set on this venue. I thought she didn't want me there anyway, I couldn't resist pointing out. There was a long pause. She was just stressed about the planning. You know she wants you at her wedding. That's not what she said, I reminded her. Or what you said. Let's not focus on that right now, she deflected. This is about helping Brianna in her time of need. Of course it was. It was always about Brianna. Meanwhile, Trevor had been unusually quiet throughout this drama. According to my resort staff, he had taken the news of the cancellation with remarkable composure, asking detailed questions about the renovations and the management structure. My suspicions were confirmed when Jackson called me the following day. Mr. Blackwood has been asking some interesting questions, he reported. He wanted to know who owns the resort and whether that person might reconsider the renovation timing. What did you tell him? Just that ownership information is confidential, but that the decision came from the highest level. He seemed thoughtful. A few hours later, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Trevor Blackwood. We need to talk about Hampton Horizon, privately. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in the city the next day. He was waiting when I arrived. dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, looking every bit the successful investment banker. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Of course. How can I help?" Trevor studied me carefully. "I've been doing some research on Hampton Horizon Resorts. Interesting company. Privately held, very little public information about the ownership." I nodded noncommittally. "But I have resources and connections in the financial world," he continued. "It took some digging, but I found the holding company structure, traced it through 3 shell corporations to an entity called SP Enterprises." My pulse quickened slightly. He was getting close. "The interesting thing about SP Enterprises," Trevor said, leaning forward, "is that its initials match a certain brother-in-law-to-be. Stefan Patterson." Our eyes locked across the table. "You own the resort, don't you?" he asked directly. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I'd anticipated, but not in the way I'd expected. I nodded once. "I thought so." Trevor sat back. The timing of the renovations seemed convenient. "Business decisions," I said carefully. "Of course," he agreed, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Just like your text about selling the resort was a business statement, not a joke." "You've figured it all out," I acknowledged. "The question is, what do you plan to do with this information?" Trevor considered this. "That depends on you. But first, I have a question. Why doesn't your family know about your success?" I explained the years of dismissal and the dynamics at play. To my surprise, Trevor nodded in understanding. "I've noticed how they treat you," he admitted. "It bothered me from the first family dinner. Brianna can be challenging. I love her, but I'm not blind to her flaws." "What happens now?" I asked. Trevor sipped his coffee. "I think it's time for some truth. Brianna's meltdown over the venue has revealed aspects of her character that concern me before we commit to marriage. Your parents' reaction has been equally illuminating. You're reconsidering the engagement? Let's just say I'm reassessing some dynamics. But first, I think we need a family meeting." The emergency family meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening at our parents' home. Brianna had insisted everyone clear their schedules for this wedding crisis summit. She had no idea what was really coming. I arrived last, purposely timing my entrance so everyone else would already be gathered. The living room was tense with anticipation. Brianna sat on the couch, eyes red from crying, flanked by our parents. Trevor stood by the fireplace, composed and thoughtful. Finally, Brianna snapped when I walked in. "Nice of you to make time for my catastrophe." "I'm here now," I said calmly, taking the armchair farthest from the family grouping. "We need solutions," our father began without preamble. "Brianna's wedding venue has fallen through, and we have 300 guests expecting an event at Hampton Horizon." "I've explored every avenue," Brianna said, her voice trembling. "I've called in every favor, offered more money, even threatened legal action. Nothing works." "What about other venues?" I suggested. "Nothing is available on our date," our mother interjected. "Not anything suitable anyway." "There's the country club," I pointed out. "The country club?" Brianna nearly screeched. "After we sent out save the dates for Hampton Horizon? Do you have any idea how embarrassing that would be?" "More embarrassing than canceling altogether?" I asked. "You don't understand," she said dismissively. "You've never cared about appearances or status. That's why your life is." She gestured vaguely at me. "What it is." The familiar dismissal stung, even now. Our parents nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of pity and disappointment, as they regarded their underachieving son. Actually, Trevor spoke up from his position by the fireplace. "I think Stefan understands more than you realize." All heads turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Brianna asked. Trevor pushed away from the fireplace and walked to stand beside my chair, a subtle but clear indication of alignment. "I've been doing some research into Hampton Horizon Resorts," he said calmly. "Specifically, into who owns it." The room went silent. I could almost hear the collective confusion as my family tried to understand the relevance. "Why does that matter?" our father finally asked. "Because," Trevor continued, "I thought it might help to speak directly to the owner about our situation. But finding that information proved challenging. The resort is owned through a series of holding companies, very carefully structured for privacy." Brianna looked bewildered. Our parents exchanged glances. After considerable effort, I traced the ownership to an entity called SP Enterprises, Trevor continued. "Does that sound familiar to anyone?" All 3 of them shook their heads. SP, Trevor repeated. Stefan Patterson. A beat of silence followed, then nervous laughter from my sister. That's ridiculous, she said. Stefan doesn't own anything, let alone a luxury resort. Is it ridiculous? Trevor asked, looking directly at me. Stefan, would you like to clarify the situation? All eyes turned to me. The moment I had both avoided and anticipated for years had arrived. I took a deep breath. Trevor is correct, I said simply. I own Hampton Horizon Resorts. I've owned it for 7 years. More silence. Then an explosion of disbelief. That's impossible, our father sputtered. You're lying, Brianna accused. Why would he lie about something so easily disproven? Trevor countered. If this is some kind of joke, our mother began. I reached into my pocket and removed my wallet, extracting a business card I rarely used. I placed it on the coffee table. The card was simple, elegant. Stefan Patterson, Chief Executive Officer, Hampton Horizon Resorts. This isn't possible, Brianna whispered, staring at the card. It's not just possible, it's true, I said. I've built this business from nothing over the past 10 years, starting with a single property and expanding to what you see today. But you never said anything, our mother stammered. You never asked, I replied simply. Not once in 10 years did any of you express genuine interest in my work or my life. You decided who and what I was long ago, and nothing I could have said would have changed that perception. So the renovations, Brianna began, comprehension dawning. A legitimate business decision, I stated, though the timing was influenced by recent events. What events? Our father demanded. I pulled out my phone, opened the text thread, and placed it on the table next to my business card. The messages were visible to everyone. You can't afford our wedding venue. Stay home. Thank God. Okay, selling the resort. Our father picked up the phone, reading the exchange with growing discomfort. Our mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Brianna stared at the floor. For years, I continued into the silence. I've accepted your perception of me as the family failure. I've sat through countless dinners, listening to subtle and not-so-subtle digs about my career, my choices, my supposed lack of success. I looked directly at Brianna. When you told me I couldn't afford to attend your wedding at my own resort, a resort I built while you were finding yourself, something finally broke. Not because of the money, but because after all this time, your default assumption was still that I had nothing to offer. We didn't know, our father protested weakly. You didn't want to know, I corrected. I dropped out of college to start a business, and you wrote me off. You decided that success only looks one way your way. You never once considered that I might be building something valuable, something that mattered to me. Memories flooded back as I spoke, countless moments of dismissal and judgment flashing through my mind. Remember when I couldn't make it to Thanksgiving 3 years ago because of a work emergency? I asked. I was closing a $15 million expansion deal. Remember when you mocked my shabby apartment, Mom? That was temporary while my penthouse was being renovated, a penthouse worth more than this entire house. The room was completely silent now, my family absorbing the revelation that the son and brother they had dismissed for years was actually the successful one, the one who had built something substantial while they weren't paying attention. I don't understand why you kept this secret, our mother finally said. At first it was because the business was genuinely small and struggling. Later, when success came, I wanted to see if your treatment of me would ever change based on who I was, not what I had. It never did. Brianna, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. So you canceled my wedding venue on purpose, she accused. To punish me. I scheduled necessary renovations, I corrected. The timing was influenced by your text and Mom's response, yes. But ask yourself this, if I were truly vindictive, wouldn't I have let you discover the truth on your wedding day? Wouldn't I have waited until you were standing in my resort, surrounded by your guests, before revealing that the venue you thought I couldn't afford was actually mine? She had no response to this. The resort needs renovations, I continued. That's the truth. The timing is flexible. That's also true. Whether those renovations proceed as scheduled depends on what happens next. What does that mean? Our father demanded. It means I'm done pretending, I said firmly. I'm done being the family failure. I'm done accepting your narrative about my life. From now on, we either have an honest relationship based on mutual respect, or we don't have a relationship at all. The revelation of my ownership of Hampton Horizon created a seismic shift in my family dynamics. The days following our confrontation were filled with awkward attempts at reconciliation, primarily driven by the practical need to resolve Brianna's wedding venue crisis. Our mother was the first to reach out, calling the morning after our showdown with a voice thick with forced cheer. "Stefan, darling, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. I think there may have been some misunderstandings over the years." "Misunderstandings implies accidents, Mom," I replied. "What happened wasn't accidental. Well, whatever you want to call it, I think we should put it behind us. Family is family, after all. Is this about resolving our relationship, or is it about Brianna's wedding venue?" I asked directly. The telling pause before she answered confirmed my suspicion. "Can't it be about both?" she finally said. "No, Mom, it can't. One has to come first, and it can't be the venue." She sighed. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this." "That response tells me everything I need to know," I said quietly before ending the call. The next attempt came from our father, who showed up at my office unannounced 2 days later. My assistant, Kelly, came to my door looking uncomfortable. "There's a Harold Patterson insisting on seeing you," she said. "He claims he's your father." I hadn't even told my staff about my family, that's how separate I'd kept those worlds. "He is," I confirmed. "You can send him in." My father entered my office with the hesitant steps of a man in unfamiliar territory. His eyes widened as he took in the space, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, the tasteful modern furniture, the awards displayed discreetly on one wall. "This is quite impressive," he said, standing awkwardly just inside the doorway. "Thank you. Please, sit down." I gestured to the visitor chairs across from my desk. He sat, still looking around like he had wandered into a museum by mistake. "I had no idea," he murmured. "That was clear," I acknowledged. He shifted uncomfortably. "Your mother told me about your conversation. I thought perhaps we could speak man to man." "I'm listening." "First, I want to apologize," he began. "It seems we've underestimated you all these years." The phrasing caught my attention. "Underestimated my business success, you mean? Not me as a person." He looked confused. "Isn't it the same thing?" "No, Dad, it's not. And that's precisely the problem. You're only here, only apologizing, because you've discovered I'm successful by your definition. If I owned a small landscaping business that made me happy but not wealthy, would you be sitting here apologizing for how you've treated me?" My father had no answer for this. His silence was more honest than any words could have been. "I thought so," I continued. "This isn't about respecting me or my choices. It's about the fact that I've achieved something you deem valuable. That's not the basis for a healthy relationship." "What do you want from us then?" he asked, frustration edging into his voice. "Genuine understanding, actual interest in who I am as a person, not what I own or what I can provide. Recognition of the pattern of favoritism and dismissal that's defined our family dynamic for decades." "That's asking a lot," he said. "Is it? Is basic respect and genuine interest really a lot to ask from one's parents?" He had no response to that either. Brianna's approach was the most transparent. She texted 3 days after our confrontation. "Can we talk about the wedding, please?" We met at a cafe near her apartment. She arrived looking uncharacteristically subdued, dressed more simply than her usual elaborate style. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, stirring her latte without making eye contact. "Of course," I replied neutrally. "So," she said after an awkward pause, "you're rich." Despite everything, I laughed. Leave it to Brianna to cut straight to the heart of what mattered to her. "I've done well for myself," I acknowledged. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, a hint of the old accusatory tone creeping back in. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. "Maybe," she admitted finally. "Probably." "Exactly," I said. "And that would have been about what I had, not who I am." "I don't understand why that distinction matters so much to you," she said. "I know you don't," I replied. "That's part of the problem." She looked frustrated but pushed ahead to her main agenda. "About the wedding." "What about it? Can we still have it at Hampton Horizon? On our original date?" I studied my sister, trying to see beyond the entitled exterior to the person I'd grown up with. "Do you understand why I scheduled those renovations when I did?" "Because I hurt your feelings with my text," she said, her tone suggesting she found this reason petty. It wasn't just the text, Brianna. It was a lifetime of dismissal culminating in that moment of casual cruelty. You excluded me from your wedding because you assumed I couldn't afford it, and Mom endorsed that exclusion with relief. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't think of it that way. I know. That's the point. You've never had to think about how your words and actions affect me. You've always been the center of our family universe, with Mom and Dad orbiting around you and me somewhere out on the periphery. One surprising bright spot in this aftermath was my developing relationship with Trevor. He called me directly the day after the family confrontation. That was quite a revelation, he said when I answered. Sorry you got caught in the middle of family drama, I replied. Actually, I'm not sorry at all, he said thoughtfully. It was illuminating in ways I needed before the wedding. We agreed to meet for drinks that evening at a quiet bar in the city. When we settled into a corner booth with our scotches, Trevor looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. I need to thank you, he began. For what? For showing me aspects of Brianna I might not have seen until it was too late, he said. Don't misunderstand, I love your sister. But her reaction to the venue cancellation revealed a materialism and entitlement I hadn't fully recognized before. Are you reconsidering the engagement? I asked directly. He twirled his glass thoughtfully. Not reconsidering the relationship, but perhaps the timeline. And definitely requesting some premarital counseling. That's surprisingly mature, I admitted. I come from money, Stefan. Old money, with all the lessons that entails. One of those lessons is being able to spot people who value wealth over character. He took a sip of his scotch. I always thought Brianna valued me for myself, but her meltdown over a venue, not even the marriage, just the venue has given me pause. She's not a bad person, I found myself defending my sister, despite everything. She's just been conditioned to value certain things. I know. He nodded. That's why I'm not walking away. But I do think we need to address some fundamentals before proceeding with marriage. Over the next few weeks, a new pattern emerged. Our parents made increasingly elaborate attempts at reconciliation, expensive gifts delivered to my office, which I returned, invitation to exclusive golf outings with our father's business associates, which I declined, even a surprise visit from our mother's personal shopper offering to update my wardrobe, whom I politely but firmly sent away. What none of these gestures included was what I had explicitly asked for, genuine interest in who I was as a person or recognition of the harmful family patterns. Meanwhile, Trevor convinced Brianna to attend a few sessions with a family therapist. To my surprise, she invited me to join one of these sessions. The therapist, Dr. Angela Rivera, had a calm, no-nonsense demeanor that seemed well-suited to cutting through Brianna's drama. I understand there's been a significant revelation in your family recently, she began after we settled into her comfortable office. My brother's been hiding his success from us for years, Brianna stated immediately. Interesting framing, Dr. Rivera observed. Another way to put it might be that your family made assumptions about your brother without actually knowing the facts of his life. Brianna looked startled by this reframing. Stefan, how would you characterize the situation? The therapist asked. I built a business that became successful while my family maintained a narrative that I was a failure, I said simply. I chose not to correct that narrative because it revealed the conditional nature of their regard. Conditional how? Based on external markers of success rather than who I am as a person, I explained. The proof is in the fact that they're only interested in reconciling now that they know I'm successful by their definition. That's not fair, Brianna protested. We're trying to fix things. Are you? I challenged. Or are you trying to secure your wedding venue? The therapist held up a hand. This is actually a useful point of discussion. Brianna, if Stefan's business was successful but modest, say, a thriving local shop rather than a luxury resort, would you be pursuing reconciliation with the same urgency? Brianna's hesitation was telling. I think, Dr. Rivera continued, that this situation has created an opportunity for your family to examine some fundamental dynamics. Stefan, what would meaningful reconciliation look like to you? Genuine interest in who I am, not what I have, I replied without hesitation. Recognition of the pattern of favoritism and dismissal, and respect for my boundaries and choices going forward. Brianna looked thoughtful for the first time. I never realized you felt that way about our family. You never asked, I pointed out, not unkindly. The session ended with a homework assignment. Brianna was to spend time with me learning about my business and life choices without judgment. while I was to remain open to her genuine attempts at connection if they came. To my surprise, Brianna took this assignment seriously. She requested a tour of the resort not as a wedding venue, but as her brother's business achievement. During the tour, she asked thoughtful questions about how I'd built the company and the challenges I'd faced. "I had no idea you were doing all this," she admitted, as we stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the ocean. "While I was posting Instagram photos from Bali on Mom and Dad's dime, you were building this." "Different paths," I said with a shrug. "Better paths," she corrected. "More meaningful, anyway." It was the first genuinely self-aware comment I could remember hearing from my sister, and it kindled a small hope that perhaps real change was possible. After 6 weeks of family therapy sessions, awkward dinners, and cautious conversations, I made my decision about Brianna's wedding. I invited her, Trevor, and our parents to my home, a space none of them had ever visited before. Their reactions as they entered my oceanfront property ranged from our father's poorly concealed property value assessment to our mother's immediate redecorating suggestions to Brianna's wide-eyed silence. Trevor alone seemed genuinely appreciative without calculation. Before we discussed the wedding, I began once everyone was seated in my living room. "I want to be clear about where things stand between us as a family." I looked at each of them in turn. These past weeks have shown me both encouraging signs and concerning patterns. I've seen genuine efforts, particularly from Brianna and Trevor, to understand the dynamics that led us here. I've also seen attempts, particularly from you, Mom, and Dad, to reestablish the old relationship but with a new awareness of my financial status. Our parents shifted uncomfortably, but didn't deny it. "I've decided to allow the wedding to proceed at Hampton Horizon on the original date," I announced. "The renovations will be rescheduled." Brianna's face lit up, but I held up a hand before she could speak. "This comes with conditions," I continued. "First, this isn't a free venue. You'll pay the contracted rate like any other client. My business isn't a family piggy bank." Trevor nodded approvingly. "Second, our reconciliation needs to continue independent of wedding planning. The venue and the relationship are separate issues." "Of course," our father agreed quickly. "Third, I want a family therapy session with Dr. Rivera at least once a month for the next 6 months. Not just with Brianna, but with all of us." This condition met with less enthusiasm, but reluctant agreement. "Finally, I want honest acknowledgement from each of you about the family patterns we've maintained all these years. Not just private acknowledgement in therapy, but open recognition between us." This last condition created visible discomfort, particularly for our parents, who had built careers on presenting a perfect family image to the world. "Those are my terms," I concluded. "The wedding can proceed with all of you accepting these conditions, or not at all." To my mild surprise, they agreed to everything. Our mother even added, with apparent sincerity, "We want to do better, Stefan. We really do." The months leading up to Brianna's wedding became a crash course in family recalibration. The therapy sessions were often uncomfortable but ultimately productive. Our father struggled the most, his generations of conditioning about success and appearances making it difficult for him to understand my perspective. Our mother oscillated between genuine remorse and slipping back into old patterns of favoritism. Brianna, however, underwent the most visible transformation. The wedding planning continued, but with a noticeably different tone. She consulted me about business decisions, respected my staff, and even scaled back some of her more outrageous demands. During one particularly honest moment over coffee, she admitted, "I've been jealous of you my whole life." I nearly choked on my espresso. "You were jealous? You were the golden child." "I was the performing monkey," she corrected. "I got attention for doing exactly what Mom and Dad wanted. You got criticism for following your own path, but at least it was yours." I never had the courage to figure out who I actually was or what I wanted. It was a perspective I'd never considered, that Brianna's favored status came with its own constraints and pressures. Trevor and I developed a genuine friendship during this period. He often sought my business advice, and I found his financial insights valuable for my expansion plans. He confided that the wedding delay had been the best thing for his relationship with Brianna, giving them time to address fundamental issues before marriage. On the morning of the wedding, I stood in my office at Hampton Horizon, watching the staff transform the oceanfront ceremony space into Brianna's vision. The past year had been a journey none of us could have predicted, from that hurtful text message to this moment of cautious family reconstruction. The ceremony itself was beautiful, if less ostentatious than originally planned. Brianna had opted for elegance over extravagance, a small but significant shift in priorities. As I stood beside Trevor as one of his groomsmen, another change from the original plan where I'd barely been included, I caught our parents' eyes in the front row. They offered tentative smiles, genuine if still learning. At the reception, I was scheduled to give a toast, something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. As I stood and clinked my glass for attention, the ballroom quieted. When Brianna asked me to speak today, my first thought was to decline. I began honestly. Our family journey hasn't always been smooth, as some of you know. But standing here now, I'm grateful for the difficult road that led us here, because without those challenges, we might never have found our way to truth. I raised my glass toward my sister and her new husband. Brianna and Trevor, may your marriage be built on honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to see each other clearly, not just for the appealing surface, but for the complex reality beneath. May you value each other for who you are, not what you have or what you can provide. I saw Brianna wipe away a tear as she understood the deeper meaning in my words. To the bride and groom, I concluded, and to the wisdom that comes from learning to truly see each other. The celebration continued late into the night. As things were winding down, I found myself alone on the terrace, looking out at the moonlight reflecting off the ocean. Our father joined me, 2 tumblers of scotch in hand. He offered one silently, and I accepted. "I've been thinking about something you said in therapy," he began after a comfortable silence. "About how I never asked what made you happy, only what would make you successful." I nodded, waiting. "So I'm asking now," he said, turning to face me fully. "What makes you happy, Stefan?" It was such a simple question, but one he had never asked before. The fact that he was asking it now, on this day, in this place, felt like a small but significant breakthrough. "Building things," I answered honestly. "Solving problems, creating spaces where people can connect and celebrate and rest, having control over my time and choices, learning constantly." He nodded slowly, considering this. "Not so different from what I wanted, really. Just a different path to get there." "Maybe so," I agreed. "I'm proud of you," he said, the words coming out rough with emotion. "Not because of all this," he gestured at the resort around us, "but because you had the courage to be yourself even when I made that difficult." It wasn't a complete transformation. Years of entrenched patterns wouldn't dissolve overnight, but it was a start, a genuine moment of connection that acknowledged me as a person, not just a success story. Our family continued its halting progress in the months that followed. Some therapy sessions were breakthroughs, others felt like setbacks. Our mother still occasionally slipped into comparing Brianna and me, though she caught herself more often. Our father made genuine efforts to understand my business on its own terms, not just as a status symbol. Brianna and Trevor settled into married life with a healthier perspective than they might have had without the pre-wedding revelations. They even invested in a small vacation rental property of their own, with Brianna handling the design and Trevor managing the finances, a venture that gave them common purpose beyond social appearances. As for me, I learned that standing up for myself didn't have to mean cutting ties completely. I learned that people can change, even if imperfectly and incompletely. I learned that my worth was never tied to my family's recognition of it, but that their recognition could still heal old wounds. Most importantly, I learned that success comes in many forms. Financial success had given me freedom and options, but the real achievement was building a life authentic to my values and establishing relationships, family and otherwise, based on genuine respect rather than obligation or advantage. The journey from that hurtful text message to genuine family reconciliation wasn't linear or perfect. It's still ongoing, with progress and setbacks along the way. But standing in my truth finally allowed everyone to see me clearly, and sometimes, being truly seen is the first step toward being truly understood. Family relationships can be our greatest source of both pain and healing. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you, but by the integrity with which you live your life.